wherever the Freedom Trail brings you.
The Freedom
We
Trail.
did that yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's very walkable, so we kind of walk it everywhere.
Yeah.
Although that's kind of just the name of the place.
Excuse me, where's the little breakfast?
Mike and Patty's?
Yeah, maybe that.
It's you look for Fayette and Church Street. So you're on Church Street right now. You got to go to Fayette Street. It should be. Yep. Thank you. Have a good one.
Have a good day. Thank you.
You too.
Friendly. We found, like, from the moment we landed, like even in the airport, everyone was so nice and happy to answer questions.
It's super friendly, and ever since I got my puppy, I feel like I've gotten to know my neighbors and the community a lot better.
Because everybody wants to say hi to the dog too.
That too.
I wasn't expecting you to actually hit him. Chances are, if you're from Massachusetts, you've never even heard of this neighborhood, and there's a good reason for that, and it's not just that it's small. Unless you live here or you're going to Mike and Patty's, there's not really much of a reason for your average Joe or even a tourist to wander over here. And you guys are visiting from Ireland?
Yeah, from Dublin.
Nice. So what brought you over to the Bay Village?
We're staying not far from here in the Found Hotel. It's been kind of one of the places on our bucket list to visit for a while.
Also, why is it called the Bay Village? There's not a bay. Well, it used to be one. It used to be right next to one. Everything you see behind me now used to be a landfill and part of a shallow part of the Charles River. That landfill, which today consists of Back Bay and the South End, was filled in during the 1800s to make way for Boston's ever-expanding population of new immigrants and workers. The neighborhood itself is tucked right between those two neighborhoods, as well as Boston's Theater District. So, excuse me if there's a little bit of spillover in this video.
Every time I have friends over, they're like, oh, I forget how cute of an area it is.
Like we were just saying, everywhere you look, everything's so pretty. All the buildings are gorgeous.
Everything's really clean.
Yeah, it is that's something I've heard a few times too, is it's a very clean city.
Yes, it is.
And who lived in these tiny houses, you might be wondering? Well, it was the same people who built them at first. The architects who built the lavish and historic homes that you can see behind me on Beacon Hill decidedly built smaller versions of those same houses for themselves and their families. Because of its near irrelevance, the Bay Village has mostly kept its same 1800s charm since it was originally built. How would you compare something like this or the North End to, like, Ireland?
It's very different.
Very different,
Yeah. There
yeah.
is some stuff that would be older, but not as much. Not preserved to this level, not still used as much. Like, things that are quite old tend to be kind of tourist attractions or just outright ruins.
It does have some slightly newer Art Deco buildings, which have since been converted into loft apartments or, like the one behind me, a small business. There's also a castle here, like straight up. There is just a castle in the center of Boston. It used to be a base for the National Guard, and now it's just here because it's a castle. That's wicked cool. Today it exists as Boston's smallest officially recognized neighborhood. I probably should have said that at the start. Its closeness to the theater district proved to be appealing to a lot of actors who worked in that district, a lot of them seeking their homes over here.
I am a dancer with a ballet,
nice.
and the location is perfect for me. It's a 10-minute walk to where we rehearse, also a 10-minute walk to the theater downtown. It's gonna be hard to beat this area.
Two of these actors, David and Elizabeth Poe, conceived famed poet Edgar Allan Poe right here in the Bay Village. He only really lived here for like a year. His sculpture and his house of birth isn't even there today. Poe himself wasn't too fond of the elitism of the Boston writing scene, which is why they quite frankly depicted this pretty honestly by having a statue of him leaving angrily. Actors turned to filmmakers by the turn of the 20th century, and multiple buildings within the Bay Village were converted into storage spaces for film reels or film equipment. There isn't really like a huge park scene in the Bay Village. It's more like little small triangles tucked into the corner, much like the Bay Village itself actually. But of course, thanks to its location, America's first ever public park, the Boston Common, as well as the Boston Public Garden, are nothing more than a 10-minute walk away.
There's little parks everywhere, like all these little tiny things. There's one by our hotel that just you're walking through it at night. There's a ton of bunnies in it.
A lot of people own cars here too, but I mean, with a location like this, that seems like it's a lot more out of luxury than necessity, because you don't really need a car when you live here.
Transport is fantastic as well. Like, we'd find it transport at home now not great. It's like every few minutes you have an option just to hop on something.
The Bay Village today is something of an upscale neighborhood for working professionals and retirees.
I would say it's kind of upscale, but also I feel like there are also cute little apartments in the area that are also kind of affordable given, city prices.
But much like the rest of Boston, it paints a much darker history by the mid-1900s. You see, with the death of the theater district and the film industry in the 1940s and 50s, came the rise to something much, much different to subsidize the lost profit of the real estate. Thus was born Boston's Combat Zone. A section of the city where the law would turn a blind eye to what happens as nightclubs, adult books, gambling, strippers, and prostitution roamed unchecked throughout the area. I don't want to talk too much about the Combat Zone itself until a different episode where it'd be more appropriate, but it is important to address this, as you must be aware there was significant spillover of this section of belligerents into the Bay Village, becoming something of a haven for prostitution and itself becoming a home for several gay bars and drag bars. One of them still being here today, actually. To my knowledge, Jacques' Burlesque Club is really the only remnant remaining of Boston's Combat Zone today. The Combat Zone itself went through a gradual liquidation process after becoming the site of a murder of a Harvard University quarterback. And also by the 1990s, the internet became a thing, so there was much less of a need for adult porno theaters when you could just get that online. But its seedy legacy was still felt within the Bay Village all the way up to the early 2000s. Because it's predominantly residential, the area went mostly unobserved and used to, and allegedly still does, have a bit of a problem with prostitution. Though today that mostly would come from wealthy guys taking prostitutes back home with them. If you ever wondered why a revolving door has a second regular door next to it, as well as multiple emergency exits, then I can directly say you have the Bay Village to thank for what may seem as a redundancy, but actually comes from a lesson well learned during the second highest fatality count from a single building fire at the Coconut Grove nightclub. A semi-below grade nightclub over capacity with 1,000 people within, lined with fake palm trees, was thrown to a blaze in 1942. The fire spread from a corner bathroom near the main entrance throughout the building as guests struggled to exit through a single revolving door, the night ending with over 400 people having perished in the fire. This fire is the reason why codes got significantly more strict today, offering multiple means of escape instead of just one door, and in the case of 17 lucky individuals in Coconut Grove, one kitchen window. Because back then in 1942, as little as 10 days before this fire, the Boston Fire Department themselves inspected the building and deemed it up to code and safe. Coconut Grove had multiple connections to the Boston Mafia, a former speakeasy turned nightclub owned by a mafia kingpin, before his assassination of course, leading to the transfer of the club to his lawyer, Barney Walensky. Walensky also having connections with former Boston Mayor Maurice Tobin, the same guy who the Tobin Bridge in Chelsea was named after. Walensky hired mafia goons to work as busboys and chefs, covered up exits with cloths, and even sealed one over with bricks to prevent people from leaving without paying. All of this while bragging about his mafia ties and his relationship with Mayor Tobin. And where was Walensky during the fire? He was a mass general, recovering from a heart attack, watching several victims of his own aggressive ineptitude get wheeled in covered in burns, scars, and lacerations. The Bay Village did take some time to clean up, as it's an extension of Boston at what is its very heart. Outside of the liquidation of the combat zone, the overpass of I-95 and the construction of 90 West being moved underground by way of the Big Dig was probably the closest thing to a major effort to revitalize the area. Though during that time, outside of converting some of the warehouses into studio apartments, nothing was really done in terms of a major construction project. The area has been left mostly untouched. So the Bay Village just kind of sits pretty as a remnant of whatever era Boston happens to be in. So today, in Boston's mostly safe and relatively upscale status, the Bay Village sits as a mostly safe and relatively upscale neighborhood. If I could say one thing, the quaintness of this is definitely part of the charm, but its history as a neighborhood for working class people, going to today being a haven for rich people, kind of upsets me. Even renting here is ludicrous due to extremely sparse amounts of houses. Working class individuals would benefit immensely from a centralized location like this. Instead of torturing people with extensive commutes by trains or, God forbid, sitting in gridlock on the highway, why can't something like this exist to benefit people who would use it best? The people who are building a new skyscraper in the financial district would salivate at the bit to be able to just walk to work instead of slogging through a long commute to then get a parking ticket from our animalistic meter maids for sitting somewhere too long for doing their job. Do you think there is a way that we could make the Bay Village more affordable?
I'm sure there's always a way, but I guess I'm not I'm not sure. I do feel like it's very nice and cozy, and so I hope that we can make it affordable yet still keep the charm that it has.
The tricky thing would be undergoing a project like this while still retaining the Bay Village's inherent charm, which I don't really see a solution to. Part of the charm of this is that it's very tiny. A lot of the houses are like no more than 2 or 3 stories. And that creates something of a paradox, because typically the solution for a city that's already dense and closely packed together is to build upward. And please not down. Please do not stick them in a basement. So unfortunately, this looks like a problem with no real easy solution. But on the other hand, is it really the Bay Village's problem to solve? In a city like Boston, we should have more than enough affordable options within the city limits themselves for people to live in, especially working class people, the people who literally built the buildings that we live in, you know? Like, historically, that's what this neighborhood was. It was a neighborhood built by the people for the same people. Today, it exists as a adorable, very nice looking and small community of people who live closely and fairly intimately with each other. And also really like Mike and Patty's. Very nice to meet you. Do you mind if I shake your hand? And your name is?
Chisako.
Chisako, nice to meet you. And his name is?
Oliver.
Hey Oliver, nice to meet you.
And we're going to Salem today.
Oh, fun. I love Salem. You just missed Halloween, but Salem is really fun. Do you mind if I shake your hands? It was nice talking to you guys.
Lovely to meet you, Ryan.
Paul.
Paul, nice to meet you.
Grace.
Grace, nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you. I hope we were okay.